quick brown fox jumped over the lazy dog. It's where we all began. Welcome to Lazy Dog Typewriters.
This is the Army, Mr. Jones. No private rooms or telephones. You had your breakfast in bed before, but you won't have it there anymore. This is the Army, Mr. Green. We like the barracks nice and clean. You had a housemaid to clean your floor, but she won't help you out anymore.
1941, the year that changed everything. Imagine the uncertainty of it all, living in the U.S. in the 1941. The poignancy, the high stakes and anxiety of a looming war. Fathers fearing for the future of their sons. It's almost impossible for us to truly feel what they felt, because we know that despite terrible sacrifices and cost, the war was won. But they didn't know, and they had to pay the price and bear the burden. So, in 1941, through the spring, summer, and fall, they clung to optimism, praying that their faith would be greater than their fear, and faced their uncertain future.
Howdy folks, and welcome to Lazy Dog Typewriters. Thanks for joining us today as we look at what may be one of the last civilian Smith Corona Sterling models made before World War II broke out. This is a 1941 Smith Corona branded Sterling. It has the emblematic 3 stripes, having been promoted to sergeant, I guess, in the war-like era, and a very uncommon brown paint scheme. I'll just let you soak in the colors and the beautiful design of this machine of mechanical grace. And as Kevin said in his somewhat serious opening, 1941 really was a year that changed everything, not just for typewriters, of course, but also in the world of typewriters, what we now sometimes call the typosphere. But the world itself had significant changes in that year, 80 years gone by. And the people living through that time didn't know how things were going to turn out, but they did have faith, and they prayed that their faith, as Kevin said, would exceed their fear. So, having established that context, let's take a look at this typewriter. Let's take a look at this and continue on a joyful odyssey, reminding ourselves that we are so blessed to have the opportunity to have artifacts like this from a bygone era from which we can draw inspiration and hopefully find new joy. So, Smith Corona Sterling, 3-striper, beautiful layout, classic design. Let's go ahead and get started with our review. What better way to start a video talking about the year that changed everything than by looking back a little bit further and see what things looked like before. So this is a 1939 Corona Standard. And as you can see in comparison, it's very, very similar. Notably different, of course, are the chevrons. As I sort of tongue-in-cheek mentioned, this Corona Standard just has 1 chevron, so it's a private or a PFC, and we have 3 stripes on the Sterling. More significantly, when you look for differences, a very minor difference is the shape of the carriage return arm is much more small in this version on the Standard, and it has more of an elongated, and a little bit of wax still there, but an elongated arm on the Sterling. Similarly, the Sterling has a paper bail, and it has sort of a unique pull forward and lift up operation mode, and the Standard has no paper bail and paper fingers. They retain the same platens, they retain the same single and double space selection, but more notably, they have the same keyboard layout, with the exception that, interestingly enough, on the Corona Standard in 39, the backspace key is on the right-hand side, but it has migrated over to the left-hand side. And why, you might ask, would they do that? Well, I know why they did it. It's because the Corona Sterling in 41 has added a tab. That was the primary enhancement, in fact, of the Sterling, was the addition of tabs. And these are the manual tabs, little slots that go into a tab rack on the back. I believe that these came with probably 4 when they were first left the factory. Ours has retained only 2. So we'll be on the hunt, or the new owner will be on the hunt, I suppose, for 2 more tab slots, and those can be found. But that's why they had to move the backspace from the right-hand side, as it originally was in the design, to the left-hand side to accommodate the tab key. Now, general feature set that remains the same. We still have our beloved script floating shift and our pretty much the same case before. The floating shift, of course, is the innovation where you have a segment shift instead of a carriage shift. So in some machines, as you new guys may not know, the carriage itself lifts up, but on the segment shift, the type bars themselves are lowered to get into the capital letters. All right. So let's put all of our focus on this beautiful 1941 Sterling. It is what they call a Speedline model, and it is the origination of the Speedline model. This July 1st, 1941, Ted Monk tells us on the database that Smith Corona introduced the Speedline models, and the 3A designation, which is what this machine is a Sterling. Okay, we can look at our serial number over here on the right hand side. Interestingly enough, when they did the Model 5 series, they moved the serial number to the left, so just tiny differences. Our model still retains its original Smith Corona Sterling metal spools, which I incidentally recently learned are just a little bit wider than 2 inches. So sometimes if you want to use a metal Smith Corona spool in any other machine, there's a little bit of an interference, but they always, of course, work in Smith Corona. Commenting on small things, I like this little cutout in your ribbon spool. It makes it easier to get your finger underneath it and lift it off. So that's a nifty little thoughtful feature. Sometimes folks on the database will put their serial numbers down as 1, 2, 3, 4, or H76544321 because they're looking at the touch selector lever as the serial number, but we know not to do that. We know to use the actual serial number on the right. And as I said, 75,981 puts us in the middle to the second half of 1941. And we know since it started July 1st, it has to be somewhere getting pretty close to the day of infamy, December 7th, when this machine left the factory. All right, so we talked about the carriage return arm. It is a more fully extended length. It just has a single line selector switch, so 1 and 2 line selector lever, indicator position. We have a standard ruler. We have a ribbon vibrator. I don't know if this is an artifact of just this machine, but it's kind of squared off at the tip of that vibrator in a sharp and angular way, which I have not noticed before. We have our paper guide here, which has a ruler incorporated as well, which is a very handy little feature. We have tool carriage release levers, so on the left, and then of course over here on the right, and this allows you to manipulate your carriage. Right here there's a lever that is the carriage centering lever, so if you're putting your machine away for storage, you push down on this, and what that does is it centers the carriage and also disengages the escapement rack, toothed rack, so that if you were to ship it, and when I do ship this, it will be shipped this way, the teeth are not binding in the gear, in the pinion gear, so that there's no chance that they will shear off under the stresses of shipping. It's just a nice little design feature that they retained for decades on the Smith Coronas. You have your paper bale, as I mentioned, and it pulls forward to release. It has an interesting little mechanism. Oops. There's a little notch carved out in the left-hand side, and I guess it's supposed to mesh right in there to make room for the line selector action, the arm there, the pawl, if you will. And it's just neat. It's just a neat little thing to notice, on small things to notice about these machines. Of course, we have our floating shift logo, which is in red. It's survived all these years. And as I mentioned, we have a segment shift. So we put it, continuing on the controls, we have our paper release tension lever here. So you push that in and out, and that will allow you to remove the tension on your platen so you can adjust your paper when you insert it. And you have a eraser table, I guess you'd call it, that can come forward. Also, we have this very nice dual, and I think very little used, paper support. These things are still stiff after 80 years, and the bluing on them is gorgeous. Again, small details, but it reminds me, whatever bluing mechanism they use for these is very reminiscent of the Smith & Wesson bluing they used on guns of the era, and because that bluing is deep and really pretty, and it stands out to me again as well on this here, this small piece, this paper support. And again, the crinkle coat finish on this particular example is just in great shape. Right here you have press and slide margins. The buyer has asked for me to set them to a specific location at 10 and 90, so I have absolutely done that, but of course you can press and slide them to any position you might like to set your margins. You have your tab rack down here, your bell ringer, pretty much all your standard stuff. This little slot right here is for securing into the case. And we have, my eyes tell me, I believe this is a gosh, I'm trying to think what it is. There's a Pica or an Elite. If it goes up to 90 typically on your 9-inch platen, then you have a Pica. I believe we've got an Elite typeface, and I'll have to confirm that when we do our typing test, spacing it at the moment. But in any case, let's do that. Let's put a sheet of paper in and see how this machine types. So we set up our paper guide as we want, put our paper in, and then roll her in. Let's lift up our paper bale, and release the tension to straighten it up. There we go. I'm in somewhat of a martial mood today, so we're talking about a 1941 typewriter, and I thought it would be a great time to break out some of my highly prized 2-star Admiral stationery. Never quite made 2 stars in the Navy, so this is all for fantasy, of course, but let's go ahead and give a typing sample and see how this works. 1941, the year that changed everything, and as I hinted at earlier, if we can zoom in, well, except I put 1942, so the quick round fox jumps over the lazy dog. It's where we all begin. See lazy dog typewriters on YouTube, Facebook, and Etsy. Lazy Dog Typewriters, no spaces. Alright, this is just an absolutely lovely machine. It has a wonderful, clear, crisp typeface. All in all, this is just a fabulous machine of mechanical grace. It has all of the necessary features that you might like, with the additional bonus of a tab. Truly, I think, if they had not invented the 5 series, this would be one of my favorite of all typewriters. I really love the sleek lines of the Speedline design, which is what this is. And the 5 series, although they do have enhancements, are a little bit more boxy, and the 4 series is just an incremental. It makes me wonder, of course, what might have happened if they hadn't been interrupted by the war and production had evolved at a more normal civilian pace. What typewriters might have come out in the 1960s. Maybe it would have been no different. But it's fun to fantasize about what might have changed. All in all, this is a fantastic typewriter. The brown color scheme, I've only ever seen this one particular one. I know there are more out there. But if you have an opportunity to obtain one, I highly recommend you do so. The keys are very snappy, and as I mentioned to the buyer, I think, in a conversation, and Typewriter Justice actually first brought this to my attention on a video. If you type better than I can type, you can sometimes hear the spring singing a little bit to you as you type on these particular machines, as you get a rhythm going. There's a bit of a harmonic. It's just, I don't know, it really is a machine of mechanical grace, and I'm so happy that this machine is going to a wonderful home in Oklahoma, and I hope to find another one, and maybe will stay in my home, and I hope that you have enjoyed this quick overview of a 1941 Smith Corona Sterling made in a year that changed everything. Have a great day.
Please like, subscribe, and share.